Your doorbell rings. You don't recognize the number that texted you to expect anyone tonight. Before your mind puts together a single thought, your body has already decided something. Your shoulders tighten. Your breathing shifts. You check the peephole before you check your phone. That reaction didn't come from anything a doorbell could teach you. It came from a campfire 40,000 years ago, and it's still running the show. Every single time someone unfamiliar shows up at your door. Think about how strange that actually is. You live surrounded by strangers, hundreds of them, every single day. The barista who makes your coffee, the delivery driver who leaves a package on your step, the account that follows you online, the one you've never met and never will. You scroll past dozens of unfamiliar faces before you've even finished breakfast, and your nervous system barely registers most of them. Your ancestors didn't live like this. For almost the entire span of human existence, a stranger wasn't background noise. A stranger was an event, rare enough to remember for years. And your body still treats every unfamiliar signal that way, even now, even when the stranger is just a name on a screen. Consider what a single day actually asks of your ancient wiring now. You pass a stranger on the sidewalk, exchange a glance with a stranger on the train, sit 2 feet from a stranger at a coffee shop counter, and never once feel the ground shift beneath you. Your instincts absorb all of it silently, running background calculations you never consciously notice, because most of those encounters end in nothing at all. But every so often, one of them doesn't end in nothing. The knock at an odd hour, the message with no context, the figure who lingers a beat too long. And in that exact moment, something older than cities, older than agriculture, older than language itself, quietly takes the wheel. To understand why, you have to go back to the actual size of a Paleolithic life, not the sweeping national-scale existence you live in today, where you can cross an ocean before lunch. A small one. Anthropologist Kim Hill spent years tracking hunter-gatherer groups like the Hadza of Tanzania and the Ache of Paraguay, mapping exactly who they encountered and how often, and how far they moved across a lifetime. What he found was a world built around a tight, known circle. People moved in bands of a few dozen. They recognized nearly everyone they'd ever meet in a lifetime, by face, by voice, by the particular way someone walked toward camp. Outside that circle, the world thinned out fast. Fewer people, longer distances between one group and the next, and almost no one who wasn't already accounted for, already placed somewhere inside the map of who you knew and who you didn't. This is where a specific number comes in. Anthropologist Dunbar proposed a limit on how many stable relationships a human brain can actually track and maintain meaningfully, somewhere around 150 people. That's Dunbar's number. It's the rough ceiling on how many faces you can hold in your head as genuinely known, trusted, placed within a web of obligation and history. Beyond that ceiling, everyone becomes a category instead of a person, a blur instead of a name. And for most of human history, that ceiling wasn't a metaphor or a party trick statistic. It was the entire population of your world, start to finish, cradle to grave. So what happened when someone stepped outside that circle and walked into camp? It wasn't routine. It was a calculation, run in seconds, with real stakes attached to every possible answer. Is this person a threat, carrying a weapon, or a grudge from some conflict you've never heard of? Do they carry disease your body has never met, something your immune system has no memory of fighting? Are they here to take something by force or offer something valuable in trade? Your ancestors didn't have police, courts, or background checks to lean on. They had instinct instead, built by generations of exactly this kind of encounter, and sharpened by every time that instinct got it right, and every time it got someone killed for guessing wrong. Researcher Carsten De Dreu has studied the chemistry underneath this instinct directly in careful laboratory experiments. He looked at oxytocin, the hormone your body releases during bonding and trust, the same one that floods a mother holding her newborn for the first time. What he found complicates the warm, cuddly reputation oxytocin usually gets in casual conversation. It does deepen trust, but almost entirely inside the group you already belong to, the people your brain has already filed under safe. Toward outsiders, that same hormone can sharpen suspicion instead of softening it, making the in-group feel closer while the out-group feels more distant and more threatening at the same time. Trust, it turns out, was never a universal setting your body applies evenly. It was always local, always conditional. Your nervous system was built to warm up fast for insiders and cool down fast for everyone else. Why would it work any other way when your survival used to depend entirely on knowing exactly who belonged and who didn't. And the stakes behind that instinct were not exaggerated by imagination alone. Archaeologist Lawrence Keeley examined skeletal remains and settlement patterns from prehistoric sites around the world, looking for direct physical evidence of violent conflict rather than assumptions about it. What he found was a rate of violent death, much of it tied to raids and encounters between unfamiliar groups that in proportional terms rivaled or exceeded the casualty rates of 20th century wars. A stranger at the edge of camp wasn't a symbolic worry dressed up by an overactive imagination. In a meaningful number of cases, across the archaeological record, a stranger really was exactly as dangerous as the instinct assumed. That's part of why the reflex never faded. It kept getting reinforced, generation after generation, by outcomes that were sometimes fatal for the people who guessed wrong. Here's where the obvious story starts to crack apart. You'd expect a species this wired for suspicion to have stayed small, closed, and permanently isolated, each band sealed off from the next like separate little islands. Stranger equals danger, so the logical move is to keep the circle tight and never let it widen. But the deep past tells a very different story. Once you look past the instinct and examine what people actually did, not just how they felt in the moment a stranger appeared. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner spent decades studying the Sharo system among the Juhuansi people of the Kalahari, a sprawling network of gift exchange stretched across enormous distances of open desert. Beads, tools, and food moved between people who might see each other only once every few years, sometimes carried hand to hand across hundreds of miles. This wasn't casual generosity between friends who happened to like each other. It functioned as insurance, built and maintained over years of deliberate effort. When your local water source dried up or your local game vanished during a bad season, you didn't starve alone in your own territory. You had a stranger far away who owed you something from an exchange years earlier and who would take you in when your own land failed you. The same instinct that made a stranger dangerous also made a stranger valuable if you could turn a tense first encounter into a lasting alliance instead of a fight. That's the real shape of the ancient calculation once you see the whole of it. It was never simply fear, and it was never simply openness either. It was risk assessment, running in both directions at once, constantly, threat or opportunity, danger or a future favor you might desperately need one day when everything else has gone wrong. The people who survived long enough to have descendants weren't the ones who trusted everyone they met, and they weren't the ones who trusted no one at all. They were the ones who could tell the difference, fast, with almost no information to go on beyond a face, a posture, and a handful of seconds. Now think about what you actually do today with that same ancient machinery still fully installed and running in the background. Your phone buzzes with a message from a number you don't recognize. Before you've read a single word, something in you has already started running the calculation. Friend or threat, worth answering or worth blocking without a second thought. You feel a flicker of the exact tension your ancestors felt at the edge of camp, compressed into the half-second it takes a notification to load on your screen. You've replaced the tree line with a lock screen, but the machinery underneath hasn't changed at all. It's still asking the same question it asked 40,000 years ago, in the same tone, with the same urgency. Who is this? And what do they want from me? You do it in job interviews, sizing up a stranger across a desk in the first 4 seconds, long before they've said anything worth actually judging them on. You do it swiping through a dating app, one glance deciding whether a face gets a second look or an instant dismissal, a decision made faster than you could ever explain in words. You do it walking down an unfamiliar street at night, recalculating distance and threat with every stranger who crosses your path, adjusting your pace without ever consciously deciding to. You do it on a new employee's first morning at the office, watching everyone at the coffee machine run the same quiet assessment on the unfamiliar face before a single word gets exchanged. You do it in the 2 seconds before you accept or ignore a friend request from someone with no mutual connections, deciding whether this particular stranger looks more like Wiessner's trading partner or Keeley's raider, based on nothing but a photo and a handful of details. None of this is paranoia, and none of it is a personal failing you need to fix. It's an inheritance, passed down intact, a survival system built for bands of a few dozen people, still running inside a world of 8 billion strangers, doing its best to keep up with a scale it was never designed for. Your doorbell rings again tonight, same tightening in your shoulders, same pause at the peephole before you reach for your phone. Only now you know what that pause actually is. It isn't fear, and it was never irrational, and it was never something wrong with you. It's 40,000 years of your ancestors' survival math, still running, still working exactly as intended, one knock at a time.